And gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Shook Sports Take podcast. And after a really fun wild card weekend, maybe the best wild card weekend we've seen in a very long time. The first two games were unbelievable. That followed in with Jacksonville and Buffalo, which was fun. San Fran and Philly came down to the wire. A little bit let down by that Sunday night football game between the Chargers and Patriots, and then I thought Pittsburgh Houston was a much better game than I thought it was going to be. So all around a really successful wild card weekend, and that obviously then brings us to the divisional. Now, these matchups are very interesting to me, and I'm going to get into it right now. We're going to kick things off with the Broncos and the Bills. I did release a video talking about the strengths and weaknesses of each individual playoff team. If you haven't seen that, please go ahead and just check the channel. It'll be the most recent upload. But something I talked about when it got to the Bills as a strength was the fact that I think Josh Allen is by far and away, in terms of what we've seen so far in the NFL, he's the best quarterback left in the postseason. Not to say that I don't think guys like Drake May and guys like Sam Darnold's playing at a really high level, Brock Purdy's playing at a really high level. I love Matthew Stafford. Talent of Drake May and Caleb Williams. I think Bo Nix. I think all the quarterbacks left are very talented, but I think by far and away, off of what they've done and the talent we've seen, this feels like Josh Allen has the edge, right? And so that's my biggest question heading into this game against the Broncos. I have a lot of questions about this Broncos team, not on the defensive side of the ball. There's no doubt that this defense is going to cause issues. The only question I have on that side of the ball is for the Bills, and that is how can the offensive line handle this elite level defensive line? The best in the league is what we're talking about here. They are second in stopping the run, and they have the most sacks in the NFL this season. Some ridiculously high number, like 60. They they completely wreck games is what happens when you're playing against the Broncos. Your drives are going really well, and then all of a sudden you're looking at second and 25, or third and 15, something ridiculous. They get home very well, and it's not just one singular guy you have to block. Whether you're dealing with Bonito or Allen, they find ways to get home. And then on top of that, they stop the run. Now, the Bills run the ball very well. They did not do that against Jacksonville, who was the best run defense in the league. They hadn't given up a 75-yard rusher all season. And so I think that's a big aspect of, can the Bills get the ground game going? Is there any way that they can produce something from this run game? But I don't know if they have to. And that's going to lie a lot on Josh Allen's shoulders. Can he continue to produce some of these monster plays? And can he continue to, just find ways to score? We saw a 9-yard tush push from the Bills against the Jacksonville Jaguars, which was quite ridiculous, I do have to say. It's going to come down to, when the Bills are on offense, how bad does Josh Allen want it? Which I can promise you is pretty bad. And I just think that he gives them the edge. But when the Broncos have the ball, this is the best passing defense. They give the least amount of passing yards per game, the Bills. Can Bo Nix play a great game of football from start to finish? That's my biggest question, because a lot of times it feels like Bo Nix does not. Maybe he has one or two good quarters, and then the defense sees it out from there. Think back to when they beat the Giants. The game against the Chiefs in week, I think it was 16 or maybe 17, wasn't a pretty game from him. I just feel like sometimes Bo Nix just, I don't know. I don't know if it's with the game plan and what Sean Payton is calling, or if he just psychs himself out. But there's sometimes where Bo Nix does not play a complete game. And I think in a situation like this, it could be very costly, regardless of how good this defense is. That is the issue I have with this offense. And this Broncos offense, they don't run the ball particularly well, so they're not likely to dominate the time of possession. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, the winner of this game is going to be determined by if Josh Allen can come through and basically, can Josh Allen lead this team to a playoff win and to the AFC Championship game once again? History's going to say yes. If it's not the Chiefs, it's going to say that Josh Allen has a pretty solid chance to win a playoff game. I'm going to back the Bills 24-21, but I would not be surprised if the Denver's defense gets it done. But I'm going to back the Bills. Other AFC game is between the Houston Texans, who visit the New England Patriots. Now, the Pats were not super impressive against the Chargers on Sunday night. I thought defensively they were great, but admittedly, you're not going to get to pressure CJ Stroud 30 times. You're going to get to pressure CJ Stroud quite often, but 30 times, I mean, that is completely game changing. That is why the Chargers couldn't do anything on offense. But offensively, the Chargers defense is very, very good. They're top 7 or top 10 in every major statistical category on defense. So don't get me wrong, they're a very good defense, but I just don't know if they're going to be able to cope with a defense that's even better. We're talking about top 7 in every major statistical category. The best, I mean, one of the best edge rushing duos in the entire league, in Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter. You have issues over the middle of the field with Henry To'oTo'o and Aziz Al-Shire. Jalen Petree's a massive factor, not to mention that you're still having to deal with Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley covering your best receivers. So there are a lot of factors. I don't think this is a team that's particularly bothered by cold weather. I know New England's not going to be warm, but they just went into Pittsburgh, and this defense looked great. Um, at the end of the day, you are going to have to manufacture some type of offense, and the best chance the Patriots are going to have to do that is to get after it on the ground. They're the sixth best rushing team in the league this season. Travion Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson are both going to have big days. That's the only time we've seen Houston's defense be caused issues. If you think back to the Bills game against the Houston Texans playing the Buffalo Bills, that James Cook ripped up the 50-yarder. There was a couple of rushes in that game that gave the Buffalo Bills an edge, gave them a chance, and of course the Houston's defense prevailed, but that is where you are going to have your best chance at beating this Houston team, and it's something that Pittsburgh couldn't do. And you saw when Pittsburgh couldn't get the run going and they had to start just throwing it, they had to start either taking shots or finding a screen game. Houston rallied to the ball too well. They got after those screen passes, those quick in routes and slants, and they just rally to the ball really well, and so that forces you then to have to open up the field with deep shots. And against Derek Stingley and Kamari Lassiter, it is not likely that you succeed there. And so this Houston defense is going to pose real questions for Drake May. Questions I'm not sure he's going to have the answer to. I don't know how Derek Stingley, I don't know how Stephon Diggs matches up with Derek Stingley. I think it's a fight that Stingley probably wins. We've seen him battle with better receivers than Diggs is playing at this year. And I don't know, but there are more questions in this game on the other side of the ball because C.J. Stroud was listed with 5 fumbles. Really, he only lost 2 of them. 2 or 3 of them were bad snaps, but or miscommunications on the snap. One of them he dropped, so whatever. But he turned the ball over 3 times. You cannot turn the ball over 3 times against this Patriots team because eventually, especially in the field position they were giving Pittsburgh, they will punish you. Houston need a low-scoring game in order to win, and they're likely to get that with the defense being as stacked as it is. But can the Texans' offense find a way to bounce back? Specifically, C.J. Stroud, because I thought when the Texans started to run the ball with Woody Marks, specifically Nick Chubb came in that second quarter. I think maybe it was late in the first, but Nick Chubb had a great drive, and it really kick-started this Houston offense. They ended up finding their first score of the game on that drive, and that is where I think they can be dangerous. If they can get this run game going between Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, and they won't have Nico Collins, which is massively unfortunate, but we saw Christian Kirk step up. We've seen Jaden Higgins step up in the absence of Nico Collins, who has missed time already this season. They've played without him, so it's not the end of the world, especially considering the fact that New England also won't have Christian Gonzalez. So neither of these teams have the best player on the field when Houston's offense is out there, they don't have their best player, and then the Patriots defense doesn't have their best player on defense either. So that creates a really interesting dynamic, and I just don't know how Houston find a way to get going outside of the run game, because CJ was not playing very. He was missing open guys, but I just don't know. I don't see a repeat performance like that. I'm not saying I think CJ goes out there and kills these guys, but I don't see him playing that badly again. And so, I wonder, will it be Higgins? Will it be Kirk? It could be straight back to Christian Kirk. Dalton Schultz has had a plethora of big games down this maybe the middle section of the season. It was when Nico Collins was out. He's played really well, so it could be him as well. I just think that it is more likely that Houston find ways to crack open this Patriots defense than it is that the Patriots find a way to break open this Houston defense. And with that being said, I think that Houston's going to probably squeak out a really close battle. I'm going to say it's 20-17 in favor of the Texans, meaning that both lower seeds would prevail into the AFC Championship game. That would be the first time the Texans have ever gone to the AFC Championship game, which would be pretty cool. And then they would host the Bills. Now, don't get me wrong. I could totally see this AFC Championship game beating the Broncos and the Patriots, but I just feel better about the Houston Texans going in there. And their defense staying strong and winning a close and low-scoring game. That would bring us to the NFC. The Saturday night game, is the Seattle Seahawks and the San Francisco 49ers, two of the three NFC West teams to make the divisional round, which is wildly impressive. Week 18 is the last time these two teams played. They obviously also played in Week 1, where the Niners got the win, but Week 18 is going to be much more of a benchmark for what to expect in this one, and it was an ugly game on both sides. I don't think either team played their best football. That finished 13-3 in favor of Seattle. The difference this time around is Fred Warner has had his practice window activated for the Niners. That makes all the difference in the world to this defense, even if he only plays like half the game. Fred Warner is probably the best middle linebacker in football. If you ask just about anyone who watches football, they would agree with that statement. But they don't have George Kittle. Now, as much as it hurts to not have George Kittle, they have played a lot of games this season without him, and they've found ways to win without him. Does it put more stress on Christian McCaffrey? Absolutely. But I also think that they're going to have to find ways to win and be productive on offense that aren't Christian McCaffrey. Last week we saw a big game out of Demarcus Robinson, who put up more yards in the first quarter than he had all season. It could be, think back to watching Kendrick Bourne against the Rams. He had like 125 yards and 8 receptions that night. Maybe it's time to see another Juwan Jennings big game. Ricky Pearsall is questionable. I don't know if he'll make the deadline, but they're going to have somebody step up and be really productive on offense that is not Christian McCaffrey, because Seattle shut him down when they just played in Week 18. The Seattle defense is so good, and it's by far the best defense left in the NFC, and I think that gives them all the advantage in the world, to be honest with you. I just don't know if San Francisco is going to be able to manufacture a lot of scores, and that brings me to the point that they're going to have to be unpredictable. And if you watch the video where I talked about all the different teams and their strengths and weaknesses, I was talking about the Niners, and I said I think Kyle Shanahan is quite an advantage in the NFC, because I just think, having been here before, and of course Nick Sirianni had been here before, but Kyle Shanahan is a different level of coach. McVay is close as well. I give a big shout out to Sean McVay, but Kyle Shanahan is a complete and utter football genius. And his ability to be very, very unpredictable in big situations. You saw the pass that went to McCaffrey for the score to eventually ice the game. We've seen him call that before, things like that before, and I just think it is going to be on the shoulders of Shanahan to see how this team can manufacture scores. Because I don't think it'll come from Christian McCaffrey. I think Seattle's defense is going to be very focused on, if we can shut down McCaffrey, we shut down this offense. They stopped the run at an extremely high rate, and the secondary has been good, but we've seen them have pretty shaky performances. Think back to when they played the Bucks. Of course, that was like week 6, but they've shored up since then. But there is ways to expose this Seattle secondary getting downfield. They gave up 40 points to the Rams in that overtime win. I just think that you're going to have to be unpredictable, and that's where Kyle Shanahan has an advantage. That being said, I still think Seattle's more likely. For this Seattle team, the biggest question mark is, can Sam Darnold perform when it matters at the very most? And obviously, he crumbled both games last year. You think about the game that would have won them the NFC North. He played terrible in that game, and then he got rocked by the LA Rams in that wild card weekend bout. And then this time around, I just think it's different. I do. I think if you watch Sam Darnold in the overtime win against the Rams, he played great in that fourth quarter. And then number one seed on the line against the Niners. Sure, he didn't have his best game, but he did cost them. You know what I'm saying? So he has limited turnovers in big moments, which is something that is a massive concern when it comes to Sam Darnold. Um, and I just think that if he can continue to keep the ball from being turned over, if he can limit his turnovers, and Seattle can get after this Niners defense in a way they have all season in terms of committing to the run between Walker and Charbonnet, and then hitting your big plays, your bombs, your touchdowns when they present themselves to JSN, to Rashid Shaheed. That is how they're going to win this game. I think it's going to be a little bit better than the Week 18 performance on both sides. I think obviously the intensity has to go up. I'm going to take Seattle with a 21-10 win. I just don't know how the Niners find a way to outscore this Seattle team. I think the threat that Seattle defense poses is just too high, and I think the explosiveness of guys like, or specifically of Jackson Smith and Jigba, can manufacture points and scores for this Seattle offense. I think it's probably the safest bet of the four of them. If you were gonna ask me to pick one team that I guarantee goes through, I'm gonna put my money on Seattle. Final game of the divisional round is the Chicago Bears hosting the Los Angeles Rams. This game is probably going to be the highest scoring of the lot. I would be surprised if it wasn't. I think there is, you think about the matchup with the Bears defense with the Rams offense, that sounds like points. But the Bears have had ways to score points as well. Now, the first thing that needs to be noted is that the Bears have to play a complete game of football. You cannot leave it to the fourth quarter against Puka Nacua and Matthew Stafford, who can get down the field in 15 seconds. And, even if you start to mount that comeback in the fourth quarter, it takes one play between those two, and you are right back into almost an impossible situation. But I think the Bears are going to be all right in this one, and they're not going to find themselves in a massive deficit. And I think that because of a couple of factors that all tie into one big factor. Now, the Bears run the ball at a very high rate, and the cold weather suits teams that run the ball well. That is what you want to do in the cold weather. Receivers are going to struggle to catch with cold hands. Quarterbacks are not going to be throw as well. So teams that can pound the rock, particularly, play a little bit better when it's really cold and get an advantage that way. But also being able to turn the ball over, and that leads to dominating time of possession, as does the run game. So time of possession becomes really important in games like this, and that is how the Bears have won quite a few games this season. Think back to Philly. The Bears ran for 200 yards and just completely decimated the time of possession. They also forced 2 turnovers in that game. One on the ground when Nashawn Wright came up and ripped the ball out of Jalen Hurts' hands, and then the interception from Kevin Byard as well. And the Rams do this really well as well. They're 6th in the league in rushing yards per game. It's 129. The Bears are 144 and 3rd in the league, but the Rams can run the ball really well. But I just think that they're going to score quickly when they do score. I think that Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams are going to be issues for this Bears secondary, which is getting healthier, which is a good thing. C.J. Gardner-Johnson should be back, and Kyler Gordon played last week. He only really played the second half, which is something I mentioned earlier, but he is back, healthy as well. But I'm not sure it matters. I don't think Jalen Johnson's 100%. I think Puka Nacua is going to be able to take advantage of that. The issue for the Rams that I see is this cold weather. Matthew Stafford is 1-8 in games that are below 20 degrees in his career. And I know that sounds weird because he played in Detroit, but you have to remember that Ford Field is a dome. Um, they do not play in the freezing cold weather, and so this is something that benefits the Bears massively. I think they've played 4 or 5 really cold games. Again, I talked about the Cleveland game, both games here the last week against the Packers, and then game 2 against the Packers at Soldier Field. The overtime win was also really cold, and it hasn't seemed to bother Chicago all that much. Caleb Williams looks very comfortable in the cold weather. They obviously run the ball well, and if it comes down to stopping the run and running the ball well on the other side of the battle of the trenches, Chicago certainly probably going to win it on the offensive end. Can they step up and get after Matthew Stafford on the defensive end? I'm not sure. Probably not, to be honest with you. I like the work that Austin Booker's been doing, and Montez Sweat had a couple of big plays down the stretch against Green Bay, but it's just not enough. Um, so for me, the biggest factor for the Rams is going to be, can you make sure that, firstly, if you have a lead at halftime, or even at the end of the third quarter, can you kill off that game? You have to be able to kill off that game. We've seen the Bears come back too many times for you to not just absolutely obliterate that clock. Um, don't find yourself in situations where you're coming away, certainly coming away without points, but coming away without points and not having taken time off the clock. You cannot give these Bears a lot of time, but if it's a close game, you just have to take care of the ball. That's both Kyron Williams, who has struggled with fumbles a lot this season and last season. We've seen Kyron Williams really struggle to hold the ball. And then Matthew Stafford has been throwing a lot of interceptions as of late, more than he was at the start of the year. He's got to be really locked in and take care of the ball as well. I think with the factors of the cold weather, if it was in LA, I would definitely be taking the Rams. But something about this game being in Chicago, being in the freezing cold, being a game that just doesn't play well to the Rams' strengths, I don't think. I'm going to take Chicago in an extremely tight one. I'm going to go 33-30 in favor of the Bears. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Rams got it done either. This game is really 50-50 in my mind. And I know a lot of you will probably take the Rams. I wouldn't be mad at that. But yeah, I'm going to say that the AFC Championship game is the Buffalo Bills visiting the Houston Texans, and that the NFC Championship game is the Chicago Bears visiting the Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, that is it for the divisional round. Let me know what you guys think. Yeah, just let me know where I've gotten it right and where I've gotten it wrong. We'll see how these predictions play out. Hopefully better than worse. And yeah, hope you all take care.